What if everything you've been taught about strength is a lie? You've heard it said that strength is calm, control, composure, that a real man, a real human being, keeps his emotions in check, obeys reason, and bends to the order of nature. That was Marcus Aurelius' gospel. Rule your mind, and nothing can rule you. But then comes Nietzsche, and he doesn't just disagree, he spits fire. He calls control cowardice, says composure is a cage. Strength, real strength, that's the will to burn, to defy, to suffer, and to create anyway. One sees chaos as the enemy, the other sees it as the source. So today, we ask the question no self-help book dares to answer. What makes you weak? Your discipline or your lack of defiance?
They called him emperor, but Marcus Aurelius saw himself as a soldier, not of the sword, but of the mind. Each morning, before command, before war, before the screaming weight of empire, he would sit and fight the first and hardest battle, the battle within. Marcus did not seek peace because he was gentle. He sought peace because he knew chaos and refused to let it command him. For Marcus, Stoicism wasn't calm, it was control under siege. He saw life as a siege of the soul. Ambition claws at you, pleasure tempts you, anger ambushes you, loss breaks the gates. And in the middle of all this, one voice must hold the line. Yours. He buried 8 children. He watched his empire rot with plague. He ruled while the Danube burned with war, and every night he returned not to wine, but to paper, not to escape the world, but to remind himself, you have power over your mind, not outside events. This was not poetry, it was survival. Marcus didn't flee emotion, he interrogated it. Every fear, every burst of rage, every taste of envy, disarmed by reflection. His meditations weren't sermons, they were field notes. A journal written not to be admired, but to stay alive. His stoicism was not passive endurance, it was resistance. He built what he called his inner citadel, a fortress of reason. And when the world attacked, when death came, when friends betrayed, when power poisoned, he returned behind those walls and said, no, I choose how I respond. Where others saw strength as domination, Marcus saw strength as self-mastery. To command others meant nothing if you couldn't command yourself. He didn't shout, he didn't boast, he didn't need to. Because to Marcus, the one who controls himself cannot be conquered. And yet, to Nietzsche, this was cowardice. To Nietzsche, Marcus was hiding behind walls, not charging into fire. He mistook obedience for virtue, restraint for fear, and calm for weakness. But Marcus would ask, is a man stronger when he is calm in chaos, or when he becomes it? You may break your heart, he wrote, but keep your head. This was not surrender. It was war. On the one enemy no tyrant, no tragedy, no time could ever defeat for you, yourself. Pain didn't make Marcus Aurelius bitter. It made him sharper, stronger, more exact. Most people flinch at pain. They hide from it, run, blame, distract. But Marcus leaned in, not because he enjoyed it, but because he knew what it was, training. To Marcus, pain was nature's instructor. The world was not cruel. It was indifferent. And in that indifference, it offered the greatest gift, a mirror. Not of how life should be, but of who you really are when comfort dies. A sick child, a failed campaign, a betrayal in the Senate. Each one to Marcus was a summons, not to react, but to refine. He wrote, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. He didn't mean this metaphorically, he lived it. When plague swept through Rome, killing thousands, Marcus stayed, not behind palace walls, but on the streets. He managed food, buried the dead, led his people. And then, at night, he wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way." Not a mantra, a method. This was the furnace where Stoic discipline was forged, not in ideal conditions, but in fire, in grief, in disorder. Marcus didn't build strength in spite of hardship, but through it. Because it was only when life breaks you that you discover what can't be broken. He knew that pain creates urgency, and urgency, if faced honestly, can birth clarity. That's why he embraced what he called voluntary hardship. Sleeping on the floor, eating coarse bread, living as if luxury were poison, because in excess, he believed, the soul decays. To Marcus, discipline wasn't denial, it was preparation. Every act of restraint trained the will, every moment of silence trained the mind, and every sacrifice trained the soul to endure without complaint and act without pride. Even as emperor, he refused extravagance. His robes were plain, his meals humble. He walked while others were carried. Because discipline to Marcus was not about appearing strong, it was about becoming unshakable. This wasn't moral theater, it was a constant trial. And his judge was not the Senate, not the mob, not even the gods. It was himself. This is the core of his Stoicism. The universe may test you, people may wrong you, death may visit you, but none of that can touch the part of you that says, no matter what happens, I will meet it well. Nietzsche called this slave morality, a philosophy of endurance, not power. But Marcus would say, power without discipline is self-destruction in slow motion, because what pain reveals is the soul's posture. Will you collapse, or will you stand? Marcus stood, even when everything around him fell. Marcus Aurelius never screamed at the world. He didn't curse the gods or rail against fate. He saw what was broken and stayed calm, not because he was numb, but because he was resolved. To Marcus, outrage was a kind of surrender, an admission that the world had power over your peace. And no emperor, no man should give that away. He watched cities burn, watched friends betray him, watched his own body weaken with age and illness. But still, he wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't be. Not because harm isn't real, but because your response is more powerful than the harm itself." This was Marcus's quiet rebellion, the rebellion of restraint. Where others roared, he listened. Where others struck back, he stood still, not from fear, but from principle. Rage, he believed, is the emotion of those who've already lost control. He wasn't passive. He made decisions, hard ones, ordered executions, led campaigns, took on burdens no man should have to bear, but he did it without hatred, because hatred to Marcus was weakness dressed as strength. The world could hurl fire at him, but if he didn't catch it, didn't feed it, then it would burn itself out. This is why his writings are full of images of nature, a rock unshaken by the waves, a torch still burning in the wind, a tree standing through winter. Not because they fight, but because they endure. Marcus believed that the highest form of strength is composure. To meet cruelty without becoming cruel, to face death without fear, to lose without complaint. That doesn't mean he felt nothing. He grieved, he hurt, but he didn't let those emotions rule him. He said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And that strength, silent, steady, self-contained, is what made Marcus dangerous in the best sense. He could not be provoked, could not be bought, could not be swayed by praise or paralyzed by blame. He wrote, "A man's worth is no greater than the worth of his ambitions." And his ambition, to live with virtue, regardless of applause, regardless of outcome, Today, we live in an age of noise. Rage is a currency, outrage a sport. But Marcus reminds us, the loudest one in the room is often the weakest. The strongest, that's the one who sees the chaos and does not flinch. Because real strength doesn't erupt, it endures.
Friedrich Nietzsche was not a philosopher of kindness. He saw pity not as a virtue, but as a toxin, something that corrodes strength, poisons vitality, and disguises itself as goodness. In his eyes, pity was not love. It was a concealed form of contempt. When you pity someone, you are not lifting them. You are reinforcing their weakness. You are confirming that they cannot rise, that they cannot overcome. And in doing so, you pull yourself down with them. This wasn't just an opinion. Nietzsche built an entire moral revolution around this idea. He believed the Western world had been infected by what he called slave morality, a system of values rooted in the Christian elevation of suffering, humility, and sacrifice. A morality that glorifies the meek, sanctifies the poor, and teaches that turning the other cheek is strength. Nietzsche called this a lie, a beautiful, dangerous lie. To Nietzsche, Christianity was not spiritual liberation. It was a rebellion of the weak against the strong. He claimed that the early Christians, powerless and oppressed, rewrote the moral script. They flipped the values of the strong and called them evil. Pride became sin. Ambition became vanity. Dominance became cruelty. And weakness? That became a virtue. Suffering became sacred. Nietzsche saw this as the revenge of the resentful, what he called ressentiment. The slaves could not win in reality, so they won in morality. In his book, The Antichrist, Nietzsche writes, "Christianity is the religion of pity. Pity stands opposed to the tonic emotions which heighten our vitality. It has a depressive effect. We are deprived of strength when we feel pity." For Nietzsche, compassion didn't elevate it infected. It made you soft. It made you afraid to act, afraid to judge, afraid to assert. A world built on pity would never produce greatness. It would only nurse mediocrity. And pity, Nietzsche argued, wasn't limited to religion. It had leaked into modern politics, morality, even art. He saw the rise of democracy, socialism, and humanitarianism not as progress, but as symptoms of decline. These weren't signs of enlightenment. They were signs of exhaustion. A world that no longer had the will to rise was teaching itself to kneel. Compare this to Marcus Aurelius, who taught compassion as part of duty, as part of being in harmony with nature and rational humanity. For Marcus, we must accept others' faults as we accept storms or sickness as natural. But Nietzsche would scoff at this. To accept weakness is to legitimize it. To forgive it is to protect it. Strength, he would say, does not excuse what must be overcome. In Nietzsche's universe, there is no nobility in suffering itself. The man who kneels is not holy, he is defeated. And the one who pities him is not noble, he is infected. True strength lies in rising, not weeping, in creating, not consoling. Pity may feel good, but to Nietzsche, it is the first sign that you are losing the war within. Nietzsche believed the true measure of strength was not restraint, not peace, not self-control, but the will to expand, to transform, to overcome everything that resists you, including yourself. He called this force the will to power, not merely the desire to dominate others, but the deep, primal urge to become more than you are. Not to survive, but to transcend. This, for Nietzsche, was life's only law. Not moral law, not natural law, but a raw, existential momentum that moves through all living things. Trees reaching for sunlight, animals staking territory, artists chasing greatness. The child who falls gets up and tries again. All of it is will to power life, surging forward, pushing through chaos, daring to grow. To Nietzsche, anything that suppressed this will was a sickness. Whether it was religion preaching humility, Stoicism preaching detachment, or society demanding conformity, it all smelled of decay. The weak, he said, preach obedience. The strong seek transformation. And real strength isn't staying still, it's becoming the storm that breaks the stillness. So when Marcus Aurelius preached discipline, Nietzsche scoffed. Discipline? To what end? Self-control, Marcus believed, made you rational, calm, in harmony with nature. But Nietzsche believed nature was chaos, storms, earthquakes, lightning tearing open the sky. And we are not meant to tame the storm. We are meant to become it. One must still have chaos in oneself, he wrote, to give birth to a dancing star. This is not a philosophy for the faint-hearted. Nietzsche's vision of strength isn't peaceful. It's dangerous. To follow the will to power is to break rules, to be misunderstood, to offend. It is not order. It is creativity erupting through disorder. And that means embracing pain, not as something to endure, like a Stoic, but as fuel. Pain is not the enemy. Pain is the price of transformation. Think of the artist who destroys what he painted yesterday to make something greater today. The warrior who risks everything, not for safety, but for glory. The philosopher who burns bridges to reach truth. These are not examples of balance. These are explosions. Nietzsche believed that if you do not erupt, you stagnate. If you do not ascend, you decay. This is why Nietzsche admired figures like Heraclitus and Dionysus, symbols of fire, contradiction, chaos, rebirth. He loathed comfort. He loathed systems that flatten the soul. He wanted life to be dangerous again, not violent, but urgent, alive with risk, alive with meaning you create, not inherit. The will to power, then, is not about controlling others. It's about refusing to be controlled by fear, by tradition, by even your own former self. So when Nietzsche looked at the calm, composed face of Marcus Aurelius, he didn't see strength, he saw surrender. The serenity of someone who'd made peace with a world that should never be accepted. He who has a why to live, Nietzsche wrote, can bear almost anyhow. But that why must come from you, not from nature, not from duty, from the fire inside you, begging to rise. To Nietzsche, weakness isn't just a lack of strength, it's obedience. Not the obedience of a soldier, but something deeper. The obedience of a soul that bows before what no longer deserves reverence. Traditions, morals, gods. He called it slave morality, a value system built by the weak to protect themselves from the strong. And he set out to destroy it. The Stoics, in Nietzsche's eyes, still knelt to a higher order, nature, logos, the harmony of the cosmos. They obeyed a script they didn't write. Marcus Aurelius, for all his discipline, still believed in a world governed by reason, that we should accept our fate because it is part of a rational whole. But Nietzsche asked, what if the world isn't rational? What if your suffering has no purpose? What if the universe is silent, and always has been? If that's true, then obedience is not wisdom. It's fear, and surrender is not serenity. It's stagnation. Nietzsche believed strength begins only when you stop looking up and start creating from within. God is dead, he declared, not with celebration, but with urgency. The old foundations have crumbled. There is no divine judge, no cosmic justice, no eternal plan. Just you and the terrifying freedom to become something new. And what replaces the old gods? The Übermensch, the overman. Not a tyrant, not a superhero, but a symbol. A human being who lives beyond inherited values, who doesn't ask what is right, but what is worthy. The Übermensch doesn't follow truth. He creates it. He doesn't avoid danger. He needs it. He is the answer to a world where all the old answers have burned to ash. To Nietzsche, most people will never become this. They will cling to safety, to dogma, to borrowed virtue. because it is easier to obey a dead god than to birth a living one inside yourself. Easier to follow Marcus Aurelius and accept your role in the grand design than to admit the design is gone. And now you must become the architect. This is what makes Nietzsche so unsettling. He doesn't offer peace. He offers responsibility. You can no longer blame fate, or God, or society. You must choose. You must create. You must risk. And you must suffer not with resignation, but with purpose. Because if you don't rise, if you don't will yourself into becoming something greater, then you remain what you were, a shadow of possibility, a follower of ghosts. In the end, Nietzsche didn't just reject Stoicism. He saw it as a beautiful prison noble, dignified, but hollow. There are no facts, he said, only interpretations. So why cling to someone else's? Why kneel when you can dance? Why obey when you were born to transcend? That's the Nietzschean challenge. Burn the map, slay the old gods, and walk into the storm, not to survive it, but to become it.
So, what makes you weak? Marcus Aurelius says, it's your surrender to impulse, your failure to master yourself. Strength is stillness, endurance, obedience to the rhythm of nature. Calm is a weapon and discipline, your shield. Friedrich Nietzsche fires back, no, that is weakness. Bowing to order, accepting fate, strength isn't endurance, it's eruption, it's defiance. To follow nature is still to follow. He says, create your own. The Stoic stands firm. The rebel breaks ground. One tells you to conquer your inner chaos. The other says, let it roar. So, who's right? The emperor who teaches you to endure the world? Or the philosopher who dares you to remake it? The Roman who raised a shield? Or the German who swung a hammer? This isn't just a duel of ideas. It's a war for your soul. And the battlefield? Your next decision. Choose wisely. Because, in the end, what makes you weak may already be living inside you. If this duel sparks something in you, don't let it fade. Comment below. Which path feels stronger to you, Aurelius' inner empire or Nietzsche's wild ascent? Subscribe for more battles of the mind and share this with someone who needs to choose their strength. This is the Philosopher's Duel. Until next time, the war continues.